coming up, and I don't want to delay it any longer. Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar, Youth Caregivers. They Need Respite Too. My name is Jill Kagan, and I am the Program Director of the ARCH National Respite Network and Resource Center. With funding from the Administration for Community Living, ARCH houses the Lifespan Respite Technical Assistance Center. Through this initiative and through the ARCH Resource Center, we provide training and technical assistance to Lifespan Respite grantees, their partners, state respite coalitions, and to other national, state, and community-based organizations. And our goal is to improve the quality of and access to respite for all family caregivers. Through the ARCH National Respite Locator, as well as working in collaboration with states who have their own respite databases, we also assist family caregivers in finding respite services and funding sources. To familiarize yourself with the workings of this WebEx webinar system, I'm going to turn it over now to Emily Turner, who's going to give us a brief tour of the webinar screen and some direction on how to move forward with it. Go ahead, Emily.
Thanks, Jill. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be sharing with you some important features within this platform that will help you participate on today's webinar. Today's audio will be available through your computer speakers. If you do not have working speakers, please press the phone button on the participant list, which will let me know you need dial-in information. This information may also be available under the Event or Meeting tabs within the WebEx panel. Please note that we will be sharing video clips on today's webinar that will require computer speakers. If you do not have working computer speakers, you will not be able to hear the videos we share. We will be reading off your we'll be reading off your questions to the presenters through the Q&A box today. Please submit any questions you may have at any time during the presentation. We will be collecting these questions and answering them at the designated times. If you find your screen is too small, click the plus button above the presentation. This will zoom in on the presentation. You can also download today's materials by clicking the link within your confirmation email that you used to join the webinar today. Locate Event Materials and then select each file to save to your computer. And a final reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing once it's been archived to the ARCH website. We will notify everyone by email when it's available. And that's it, Jill, so I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Emily. The Lifespan Respite grantees, their state respite coalitions, and other partners, and many of you who work in the caregiving field, I know, are all very dedicated to making sure that you're reaching all family caregivers who need support, and also engaging all the relevant stakeholders that you know will help make respite more available and accessible to them. And in fact, regarding today's population that we're going to talk about, the definition of family caregiver in the Lifespan Respite Care Act was deliberately written to ensure inclusion of youth caregivers. These youth who are under the age of 18 are, Emily, I don't seem to be able to move ahead to the next slide. I wanted to, where was I? Youth under the age of 18 who are the primary caregivers of their parents, their grandparents, or other relatives with disabilities or chronic illnesses are certainly among the population groups who are often overlooked in the provision of respite and caregiver supports. They represent a hugely unserved, if not invisible, group, and I know some of you are struggling to not only better understand how to serve them, but how to find and identify them in your own communities. I know for me, the subject has also raised questions about the children who may not be the primary caregiver, but who are significantly affected by caregiving in their own families. Again, their needs are often neglected as well or overlooked, and they may be experiencing stressful or detrimental effects as a result. This webinar is going to give us some wonderful insight and guidance on how to reach and better serve youth caregivers. And I'm just so delighted that we have two really wonderful presenters today from the American Association for Caregiving Youth, headquartered in Boca Raton, Florida. But before I introduce them, I just want to remind you what Emily said earlier. We will pause at several points during the presentation to respond to any questions or comments that you might have. And as Emily via your chat box on your webinar screen. If we don't get to all of the questions today, we promise that we'll get back to you with answers via email following the webinar. And very importantly for us, please don't forget to check your email at the close of the webinar. We'll be sending via email a very quick survey so that you can let us know what you thought of the presentations today. Our response rate to these surveys recently has been very low, and I really encourage you to respond to them because we rely heavily on your input. So please take a moment after the webinar to let us have your thoughts. Emily, I do need a little help with the slides. I can't seem to advance them.
Yep, hold on, Jill.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am, as I said, so pleased to have our speakers with us today and to welcome Connie Siskowski and Cara Zimmerman with the American Association of Caregiving Youth. Connie is the founder and director of the American Association of Caregiving Youth, which is a Florida-based nonprofit entity that began serving the greater Boca Raton community in 1998, so they've been around for quite a while. Today, AACY is the only organization of its kind in the country that addresses the issues surrounding the needs of this population, who they conservatively estimate to exceed 1.4 million children who are providing care for family members who are not able to manage life independently. AACY also includes the Caregiving Youth Project of Palm Beach County, which is the first U.S. program to support the hidden population of child caregivers, and the new Caregiving Youth Institute. The needs of these children are beyond the purview of any one system, so AACY works very diligently to integrate healthcare, education, and the community to help provide a strong foundation for these youth and their families. Connie is a recipient of numerous very well-deserved awards. During the past 5 years, she was awarded a Purpose Prize winner, which is a national endeavor that honors people over age 60 who have initiated social change. She was the recipient of the Distinguished Alumna Award from Johns Hopkins University, was named Woman of Grace by Bethesda Hospital Foundation. She became a 2012 Top 10 CNN Hero, received the Office Depot Listen, Learn, and Care Award, and most recently, Connie was awarded a star in Boca Raton's Walk of Recognition. So you can clearly see she is the voice of the country's caregiving youth. Cara Zimmerman, who works with Connie, is the care coordinator for the Caregiving Youth Project at AACY. As care coordinator, Cara conducts home assessments and follow-up home visits, linking these youth to many resources, including Respite. She will be able to provide for us a firsthand account of the lives of these young caregivers. So without further ado, I want to thank you both so much for agreeing to present this webinar today. And we will hand the baton over to you, Connie, and feel free to begin at any time.
Great. So we are thrilled to have this opportunity to participate and just very excited to be able to share some of our information to this audience with the hope of being able to help you reach caregiving youth in whatever part of the country you're in. I would just like to reiterate that we are more than open to taking questions throughout the presentation, and we will stop a couple of times to do that, but you're welcome to write them in at any time. So I think Jill kind of gave an overview, and I just wanted to give a background. So my background is in healthcare, and when our organization began in 1998, it was to provide volunteer support services to people who were homebound and caregiving families. So the history of respite provided by our organization continues. And what's really interesting is that a couple of people who volunteered with us way back then, and we were a Faith in Action program of Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, continue to volunteer with us today and provide support services to some of our families in unusual situations that we really never expected to be addressing, but are thankful that we had that process in place. So I went to the first international conference on family caregiving in London back in 1998, and when I returned to school for my PhD to have a bigger voice for all family caregivers is when I was able to participate in my research in a county-wide survey that looked at family health situations and the prevalence of middle and high school youth who were participating in that and how it affected them academically. The results were very profound, and I can clearly remember the day that I received a phone call from the principal investigator telling me the results, and just the feeling that, you know, something has to be done about it. I was a youth caregiver for my grandfather, and it was at a time when trauma in children really wasn't recognized, and so it impacted my life, especially personally. So part of our endeavor has been to maybe be able to prevent some of the later life suffering that these kids without support may incur. So we began with our first middle school in 2006, and we work in partnership with the schools. And I think this slide that represents just an overview of our changing population. All these facts are well known to you. One thing that, a couple of trends that we have seen since our beginning, and we have served about 1,000 children now, plus their families, is that it's not only grandparents who are being cared for, but also great-grandparents. And in the past 4 years, we have seen a 10% increase in grandparent care. And also, as we look at the demographics of the population we serve, we see a higher increase in the term other. So when we look at who the children serve, that number has increased. And, you know, as a result of the economy, we all know that many households are now multi-generational, and even to prevent homelessness and to have more, I guess, economic independence, families have moved together. And of course, we know that not all families have familial relationships, but today we have many blended and extended families. So I think that also accounts for the term other. So we know that there are many adult family caregivers, and we know that CDC a couple of years ago named family caregiving as a national health priority, and even they did not include children within that parameter. Back from the most recent caregiving in the U.S., we saw that 37% of adult caregivers have children younger than 18 years of age at home, but there's really no documentation about their role. In some of the other countries that are so far ahead of our country in serving this population, they included a question on their census and by that way identified some of these kids. But then as time went on, they found that this was really underreported because often families don't recognize the impact on their children or what their children are doing. And in fact, as we work with children and families, we have had children in school identify themselves as caregivers, and of course we need parental consent for them to participate in our programs. And so we might call the family in an effort to obtain that consent, and the family will say, well, I'm the caregiver. And so then we'll say, well, does Johnny do this? Does he do that? And they'll say, oh, yeah. And so sometimes our families are so overwhelmed, and I'm sure you see this too, that there's not a sense of the rest of the family. And even with children with special needs, the families often have to direct not only their resources but their time to the child who is ill or disabled. So way back in 2005 is when the first national study that documented that there were at least 1.3 million child caregivers in the United States. And so this clip was a result of the media attention that came with that announcement.
You may need to turn up the volume on your computer. It's very soft. You may be on mute, Connie.
Yeah, sorry. I would just like to point out that in the video you saw Saul Becker from the UK, and we have provided 7 handouts, and included in the handouts is really a wonderful meta-analysis that he did to let you know about what's going on in the rest of the world, because this issue is certainly not unique to the United States. What is unique to the United States is that in the UK, there's more than 300 programs that support this otherwise hidden population, and we were the first in our country And so we have a lot more work to do here. So we know that caregiving can affect the children academically, their health, their well-being, and their childhood. In 2006, there was a study which was funded by the Gates Foundation called the Silent Epidemic, and it showed that there were at least 22% of young adults who had dropped out of school who said it was to care for a family member. When we look at how much work the kids are doing, we use a level of responsibility that's very similar to the level of care or level of burden used within the adult population. And so the kids spend many hours in addition to going to school. As a result, they often become isolated. If they have concerns about grandma's behavior, they are not likely to bring friends home from school. And in fact, it was interesting. We were meeting with people at one of the private schools to see about some peer support, and the parents at the private school had concerns that their kids would catch something. So we really have a lot of barriers to be able to deal with. And, you know, when you miss your childhood as part of your normal development, it can really take a toll on you in later life. So we see the whole gamut of illnesses and disabilities that the children participate and care for. And as Jill said in the beginning, it's not always a child being the primary caregiver. The child being the primary caregiver may be the result of a single parent household where the parent or single grandparent gets sick. But often, again, because of maybe mom and dad both working, the child comes home after school to take care of grandma, and also often on the weekends. Our data shows that among the top diagnoses are heart disease when you clump together all the various cardiovascular diseases, and then it's followed closely by diabetes. And of course, mental health issues are big, as well as mobility issues. The kids mirror very much exactly what adult family caregivers do by providing personal care. And I can just reflect on my childhood, and one thing that we really have yet to address within our work is what happens when there's an opposite gender. So I cared for my grandfather, and some things came up regarding his personal care that I really wasn't prepared for. And so some of this can be traumatic. So it's not only a young girl caring for a grandfather, it could also be for a father or disabled sibling. We have been working with University of Miami, Miller School of Medicine, and this year we're really excited because we have a MD, MPH student who's looking at medication administration and management by our kids. And so that's really the first time that that will be documented in depth so that we can share that information. You know, questions arise, is it right for kids to be able to pick up medications? We've had a girl who had to go on a bus to get her mother's methadone, and yet, you know, the priority is for the mom to have the methadone rather than not. So we also know that it's very rare, if children are not in some sort of supported environment, for them to receive any information, education, or support, and certainly respite. So it's the tendency within the healthcare community not to recognize these kids, and certainly that's for a variety of reasons. And, you know, a lot of it is just lack of knowledge. because once we start talking to people and helping them understand, it might take a few turns of the light bulb, but the light bulb does go on, and then they become much more aware of what the kids are going through and their need for support. So we know that the majority of care by children is given to adults, whether it's grandparents, great-grandparents, or parents. And often we see both parents being impacted by illness. And so then it's really difficult on the children. And when grandparents become ill, and especially if it's a sole grandparent raising grandchildren, I have a special heart for those kids because they've already been through one trauma. And, you know, in the back of their minds is what's going to happen to me. A couple years ago, we had a boy who he lived with his grandmother who was disabled, and he would wake up in the night when she went to the bathroom and would stay awake to make sure that she got back to bed okay. So you can imagine when this goes on and on, his day at school, he was not totally alert and bright. So this next video is from CNN, and I think the sound will be a little better, and the quality of the production is better. So what's kind of interesting with that particular family, that her name is Mandy, is when we first met Isaac, he was, it was like 4 or 5 years ago. And through the time, it's like I met him, and when I met him, his body was frozen in time. And so I didn't really, not going back to the house for a while, I didn't have the realization of how much he had grown. And the family brought to our attention that it was really getting very difficult to get him into the bathtub. The house was small, much less getting the wheelchair through the door. So that's one thing that I've really become aware of. And another is that the family lived in a rental home, and so we had to get permission in order to build the ramp, which was donated and built, and it went from the edge of the curb right up to the front door. And so when the landlord wrote the letter, he wrote it in the context that now Isaac wouldn't have to go over so many bumps. And here, my whole focus was on how it would be easier for Mandy and her family, and the landlord, who was kind of removed, was thinking about Isaac. So that was another real awakening for me. I don't know if you've ever seen the ADT commercial that says when you are worried about what's going on at home, it's impossible to think about anything else. And so when I first heard that, I thought about our kids, because it's tough to focus in school. If you don't have a parent who is available to help you with projects or take you to the library, today there's so much competition academically that it's really a challenge for some of the kids. So one of the things that we do help them with is tutoring, and Cara will speak to you a little later about that as well. Just like adults, the kids also experience physical conditions. We had a girl whose wrist was bothering her and strained from pushing her obese mother in a wheelchair. Another boy complained about his back, and when we did a home visit, we learned that the step from the home to get his special needs bedbound brother into a wheelchair and then into the van was a high step, and so a normal ramp wouldn't meet their needs. So we were able to get a ramp donated, and that not only helped them not have to lift his brother, but it also freed our student, because he could now spend a little extra time after school, and he didn't have to worry about being with his at home when his mom got home with his brother to get them into the house. Our kids also, because of worry, because of stress, the emotional aspects really takes a toll on them. We've already talked a little bit about their isolation and their lost childhood. So I see that we have a question, and I wonder if we might just take a moment. Jill, did you want to read that question?
Sure. From Regina Stratford, it's, in North Carolina, what laws govern whether or not a child can be the responsible caregiver? For example, picking up medications and administering them, or operating equipment?
Well, and I think that's a great question, because there aren't any laws that I am aware of. Jill, I don't know if you are anywhere in our country that governs that. And so when we run into a situation where we have concern about the child's ability, we do everything that we can to bring in support services. So, Jill, I don't know, how about you? Are you aware of any laws that govern what a child can do?
No, I'm not aware of that either, but I have a follow-up question that I imagine you may get asked frequently, and that is, does this raise issues with child welfare agencies, especially if the school happens to know about the burden of the caregiving responsibilities? Does this ever get reported as child neglect?
Well, it can be, particularly if someone is uninformed, but I'm sure that you and others have seen studies that show the benefit of supporting a child and keeping them in the home rather than having them go into the foster care system. So it's one of those policy issues that needs to be addressed, and hopefully this and other opportunities will raise awareness among our legislators so we can have some change and protection. Just yesterday I met with our local area agency on aging director and spoke more in depth about this and, you know, how change needs to come about, and even with nursing home diversion type programs, if a family member who would otherwise be in a facility is kept in the home, are children in the household recognized, and can, you know, there be additional resources allocated to support this family?
I totally agree with you, Connie. I think it's a matter of raising awareness and education of people at school, of people in the child welfare agency, and just of the public at large, to recognize that if we can support these families, we can avoid more negative responses.
Exactly. So this was a drawing that one of the kids did, and so we work with the kids knowing that we can't really change the health care condition of their family member, but what we can change is their attitude and how they manage it. So, you know, from the eyes of a child, it can be hard or it can be easy. I don't know that easy is ever the right word, though. And certainly we can't deal with this whole issue just as with adult family caregivers. There is that special relationship that one develops with a compassion of caregiving, and it's a relationship that you would otherwise not have the opportunity to experience. One of the gentlemen that I worked with in the past told me that as he traveled in his work life, he was often away from the family, and it was only after being a caregiver for his wife that he felt like he had really learned what love was. So, and it's interesting, too, as we work with the children and see them, their perception changes, so that a couple of years ago, one of the boys who graduated who felt like, you know, he was in a tough situation with both of his parents being disabled, that by the time of graduation, he realized that he had many skills that his peers did not have. So that really helps. It's interesting, too, that nationally there's a focus on teaching children empathy. Caregiving youth know empathy in spades. One thing we have also sort of experienced is that with the death of the care receiver, that we have to be very conscious of the loss of purpose and what fills that vacuum for the child. So our work, as I had mentioned before, is in partnership with the schools, where we do skills building classes. We start with a foundation course that's 6 weeks, and then thereafter we meet with middle school children in grades 7 and 8 3 times a year, and monthly with high school students, changing our curriculum to fit the needs and the growth and career opportunities. We also do lunch and learn sessions in middle schools where we bring in community resources and target a specific diagnosis for each month among the top diagnoses. And those sessions are open to other students in the whole school. So it's a time for check-in by not only the kids in our program, but also school staff. So for families that will allow us, we do a home visit by our social worker, and Cara will be speaking to you in a little bit about that, and really looking at what other resources can strengthen the family and what else that they might need, including safety equipment. And then to help with restoring childhood, we do out-of-school activities. We do have an overnight camp we call Camp Treasure, because we feel like the children are a treasure, and it helps them discover the treasure within. So before we go on to Cara, I see that we have another question. And Jill, do you want to read that, please?
Sure. This is from Emily Kearns in Massachusetts, and she asks, are you finding abuse issues, medication, neglect, financial, caused by stressed teenagers?
I guess the question is asking, do we see our kids using substance and going for substance misuse and that kind of thing because they're stressed? I think because we get them early and we try and focus on their positive behavior, that we really haven't seen that as a big issue. Maybe of the 1,000 or so kids, there's been a handful that have taken that path. But also, when the kids feel the responsibilities that they do at home, maybe there's not quite the opportunity for them to become involved in negative social behaviors. So, Cara, do you want to talk about respite now?
Thank you, Connie. That was terrific. My name is Cara Zimmerman, and I'm the care coordinator here at AACY. You know, really my background for many, many years has been in food and food insecurity, and I ran a food pantry for 12 years, and I really never came across this issue of child caregiver. And fortunately, coming here, it really has opened my eyes to, as we are learning, a very invisible population. You know, I spoke at our city hall once a year. We have to present a request for monies from the city, and I started out my presentation with talking to the audience about the fact that I have a mother and father, a father that's 86 and a mother that's 82, and you know how normal that is. And my dad just had a massive heart attack, and my mom has Parkinson's, and it's pretty normal for someone like myself or my age group to have elderly parents and running back and forth to hospitals and respite and all of these sort of things that we find as normal, if that's the word. And the audience just got so quiet because I said, can you imagine a youth doing that same work? And again, awareness and enlightenment, because they really had never thought that, and you could just hear silence in the room when I brought that to their attention. And I think, you know, as we continue this work, I find more and more that the community at large is really not aware that there are so many children doing caregiving. It's quite interesting as I do the work that I do, and I feel privileged to do it as well. But so it starts with the school specialists that we have in the school, and they are the first line of defense, and they do an intake of children that they find that are caregiving youth. And if they find that there's some unusual needs or more needs than not, they will refer that family to me, in which I go to the home and do the home visit. And interestingly enough, when I make that initial call, many times the parent will say, well, you know, Johnny doesn't do any caregiving here. that it seems to be pretty normal in the family that the children are doing the caregiving, so they're not seeing that there's anything different or if the word wrong with it. It's just a normal part of their life. So they're surprised sometimes with the phone call because they really don't see it any differently, that the child, is helping in the home. And then when I come over, it really, we break it down and find out that, the amount of caregiving that's going on, and somewhat of a relief that there's somebody even just coming to the home to listen to about their life and what's going on, and just to offer a helping hand and an ear. With that initial home assessment that I do, we ask many questions about how much time the youth is giving to the family and caregiving, how much the child caregiver does, what are they doing. So that time is precious together because we really get down to finding out what the true situation is. And then while I'm there, I am able to give them some ideas, some resources, and many times they have resources as well, and together we're able to elevate their life to make it that they feel that they have more support and that there's people that do understand. We have a wonderful relationship with the schools that we are with, and the guidance counselors many times bring these families to our attention because, as Connie's been saying, there really aren't that many avenues or places that the children can go to for assistance, or the family per se. We do monitor and follow up with the family with respite care. We offer respite probably, I'd say, twice a month for 4 hours at this point, but that 4 hours twice a month is so precious. I have this one family, the father has progressive MS, so he's in a wheelchair. A young guy, just as nice as could be, and 2 daughters, and they're divorced, so the daughters come to him every other weekend, and what they were doing instead of spending time with dad was they were cleaning and helping him. And so when we were able to bring in respite care, he called and said it's so nice because now the girls can spend time with him and just enjoy him for that time they're together and not have to cook and clean out the refrigerator and do all those things that they were doing. But as Connie mentioned, it certainly won't hurt them, or it probably will help them so much to have these additional caregiving responsibilities. But I can see where just having that aid come into the home relieves the care receiver and the children, more importantly, of that precious time just to be a kid. So very grateful for the different agencies that we work with. We have 2 in the community that we work with that give us a rate a little bit lower than average. So I think I've covered pretty much the different ways that the student comes to us, either self-referral or guidance counselor. I come out and do an initial home visit. Sometimes the home visit warrants a second visit, but for the most part I go that one time, work with the family, and then do follow-up via the phone because they are so busy and they do really not have the time to meet with me more than once just because of the needs that are so stressful on the family. Some other agencies that we have in the community that I rely on is once a month we have an interagency meeting that we go to. There's probably about 60 nonprofits that attend so that we are able to really share with each other, help each other. We're always taking business cards from each other for support, and we work very closely with other agencies that can help our families and vice versa. So that's another resource that I'm able to plug into for help to give to the families. And we have a mental health first aid program here that's been very helpful. And another program that we have is a Season to Share that's through the Palm Beach Post. And every year we're able to highlight a family to receive some additional help for the home.
And so we would be happy to be able to offer more respite, but what we can offer is really limited by the dollars that we have designated that are available. I think, you know, throughout this process, the biggest thing that we see is that the kids learn that they're not alone, and that's a really big thing we hear from them. And then from their families, knowing that they're cared about by somebody that they didn't even dream cared about them has been significant. So we've had wonderful results in terms of kids progressing to the next school grade as well as high school graduation with a high school graduation rate of greater than 95%, and of those, more than 80% of the kids going on to post-secondary education or the military. And many of the children want to go into some type of healthcare field. So if they're properly supported, we all know the need in the future of the labor force as our population ages. So safeguarding and protecting these kids and giving them the support to help them graduate not only helps them personally, but it also helps society. Because, you know, as with a high school graduation certificate, a child can earn $10,000 a year more than if he didn't graduate, and then going on certainly to post-secondary education helps that too. So it helps the tax base, it helps society, as well as the individual and family. So when we say a graduation rate of greater than 95% here in Palm Beach County, and nationally it's around 75%. So it's about 20 points higher. And if these kids are not supported, then they're more likely to drop out. The overwhelming majority of our kids are financially insecure. About 76% of them attend Title I schools where there's more than 50% free and reduced lunch. But the trick is, and what we have found, is that in schools that are not Title I schools, that if there is a child caregiver, or when there is, they don't have the same resources as children in Title I schools. And so in a way they become doubly disadvantaged, because when you're in a Title I school, the school itself gets additional financial resources to support these kids. So again, we're thankful to have the opportunity to raise some awareness with you about this population. We are in great need nationally of updating the national research. The young caregivers in the U.S., which you can find a link to on our website or at the homepage or at the research section of the National Alliance for Caregiving, that data was collected in 2004 and released in 2005. So if you think about how our population has changed since then, how many more people are living longer, more disabled, more home care, and the list goes on and on, we know that that 1.3 million number is much, much greater. So through the development of the Caregiving Youth Institute, for which we received some seed funding about a year ago, we did have our first conference, and we also have formed a Caregiving Youth Research Collaborative with different universities, including the University of North Carolina, and Chapel Hill, where the library will be hosting and becoming a repository for publications. So there is some new research going on. There's much, much more to be done. We we had two medical students last year do a presentation at the American Academy of Pediatrics annual conference in San Diego. And it did receive some national attention. I believe in the handouts you also have a copy of then a follow-up article in the national newsletter. And just this past week, we received notification. I joined a pediatrician to do grand rounds at one of our local hospitals, and the chief pediatric resident has kind of taken up this cause, and we've created a resolution that has been approved at the state level and will be presented at the national level on behalf of the health and well-being of caregiving youth. So it's initiatives like this that can really help this movement and help you all to be able to provide services for this population. We also have are developing an affiliate network. We have affiliates in several states, and our model is to be able to replicate what we have done successfully so that no one has to reinvent the wheel. It's kind of like a nonprofit franchise model, so that, for instance, our newest affiliate is in Detroit, so we have a Dropbox for that affiliate to be able to access and share information as they move forward. We're also working, just because we're in Palm Beach County, everybody thinks that there are no issues here, and it's not true. And again, we're resource limited in terms of the reach of our existing Caregiving Youth Project right here in Palm Beach County. So there are many other areas to serve. So while I'm on the subject, I see that there's another question. Jill, do you want to read that?
It seems like it's directly related to what you were just discussing, and the question was, do you plan to expand your organization to other states throughout the country? And you did mention some of the affiliates that you have. I'm wondering, is there a place on your website that can link people to local resources or local affiliates?
What we have a Caregiving Youth Institute website that you can get to from our main website, and on that it has a map that has areas of the country where we have had discussions or there are existing affiliates. Some of the affiliates have encountered the challenges that we all face of losing funding, of changing people. We were going to begin in Baltimore, and the person who was heading it moved on to another job. The principal at the school changed. So, we're going to see these challenges, and so we're always looking for new ways. But it is not our intent to go into another area where we don't know the community as well as the existing nonprofits know it. So we would much rather spread our network by sharing information and helping the expansion of serving this population to existing services. And I can assure you it is super rewarding work. So anyone who is the slight bit interested, I encourage you to call. We also have a database that is not published anywhere, but we keep of people in different parts of the country who are interested in this. And it's something that, a person can't necessarily do alone. And so the more people that we can hook up together within a particular region, I think the better we are. The better the kids will be, and that's the focus, what's good for the kids. So the Caregiving Youth Institute, the 4 tenants really spell the word care. And so we're looking at connecting the kids because that's so important for them, as we already mentioned, to not feel alone. So we're partnering with the Caregivers They and have a forum on that website that is a recent initiative. So we're encouraging our kids, and as we learn about other kids where there may not be Caregiving Youth Projects, so at least they can communicate. We've had a Skype call with kids from the UK, and that was really exciting for, I think, both our kids and for the kids over there. When some of them came to visit us a couple years ago, they even wrote to President Obama to say that they felt sorry for the kids in the U.S., that they didn't have the support that is given over there. From an advocacy perspective, we need to change legislation. We're so thankful that lifespan respite is inclusive, but as I'm sure you all know, that there are other age discriminators with the National Family Caregiver Support Program and even Medicaid support for family caregivers and veteran support where the caregiver who receives any funding has to be 18 or older. And even if no one wanted to give the children money directly, if it could be put in an education trust so that they have some hope for their future, I think that would be a really good place to go. So we have, as I mentioned, other research going on through our collaborative and elsewhere. There was a study done by a student at USF in Tampa, and it's about young adult caregivers, those young adults in the 18 to 25-year-old cohort who are supported in some of the other countries who are not really well supported here, although they have access to adult services. They still have special needs. And when there was the survey done, I think it was like 362 students, and they looked at those who had never been caregivers, those who used to be caregivers, and those who are currently caregivers. And there were statistically significant differences in anxiety and depression among those three groups. So we're just finalizing the manuscript for publication of that, but there is a poster on our website of those results. And so our big goal is the education of the public and of professionals about this population and really the need for understanding of the implications of family health conditions on the whole family so that the whole family can be supported. And, you know, I know that there's an initiative for caregivers to be documented on the medical record. I don't know if there's a child caregiver, if they would be included. Jill, do you know that?
I think that's an excellent question, and I don't know that. And it might be determined state by state and how, I mean, all that legislation that's moving forward now is happening at the state level. My guess is that you have to be 18. That would be my guess, but I hesitate to speak without having seen the actual language of any of the bills.
And so even through some of the aging resources, with people having waiting lists all over the place, if there is a caregiver under the age of 18, they're not recognized. And I guess the good side of that is that then that person's priority can move up, whereas if there is a family caregiver, some of the support services that may be available, that person goes kind of down on the waiting list because they do have some kind of help. So lots of opportunity, lots of area to really support a precious population that has been ignored in our country. So what can you do while you're thinking about beginning to support caregiving youth? And by the way, although the title of the national report is Young Caregivers in the U.S., when we first began and had to communicate with people about what we were really talking about, young is such a subjective word. that we quickly switched to youth to help bridge the communication gap. So if you are in a social situation or out and about or even with your agencies, to help identify and recognize students who are caregiving, and particularly in the healthcare settings. We know of kids who have spent the nights in hospitals because they had no place else to go when their loved one was taken to the hospital. Help us work for system change, both in healthcare, education, and the community. And let's work together to change this legislation and really end reverse age discrimination. Because if a child is doing the same thing and has the same responsibilities as an adult caregiver, then and yet they're not entitled to any benefits, is this not reverse age discrimination? We believe it is, and so we're trying to work to get that changed and need all the help and support we can get to do that. So, Emily? You're going to meet some of our kids. So it's fun for me to, I don't often get to watch that PSA, but one of the students in there, we provided him tutoring. Both of his parents, one has, well, they both have diabetes. One is visually impaired. The mom has had back surgery and heart surgery, and she's also a grandmother raising grandchildren. And one day when she was just home from the hospital, his father asked him to go to the store to pick up some medications for his mom, and he forgot he was cooking, so there was a fire in the house. So thanks to Cara and some local resources, we were finally able to replace some of the kitchen cabinets that were burned. And the happy news about him is that with tutoring, he was able to play football and he received other support services and wound up getting a full scholarship to FSU. So his number is 95 if you ever watch an FSU game. Excuse me. So we hope that you agree that supporting these kids is the right thing to do, and that you may wish to support them in the work that you currently do. We'd just like to thank you so much for this opportunity, and if there are any more questions, we're happy to take them.
I want to thank both of you so much. That was an incredible presentation. I thought I knew a lot about youth caregivers, but I learned so much more today. So thank you both so much. It was really excellent and very moving as well. I had one quick question, and that you mentioned, Connie, that you have an unpublished list of people from around the country who are interested in helping raise awareness and providing services. And I'm wondering if there's any way that we can hook those folks up with our state respite coalitions so that each coalition can have a voice for youth caregivers, within their ranks. I think they'd all be extremely welcoming and interested in helping.
Yeah, well, I think that's a terrific idea, Jill, and we'd be happy to network that way. do we have assurance? Do you want to like reach out to see if there are ones in particular that would like to be connected?
Yeah, that's a great idea. We can, when we send around a link to the archived webinar and all the wonderful resources that you sent, we can also ask that question. You know, if you'd like to be connected through your coalition to someone who can be the voice for youth caregivers, let us know, and we'll try to find through you those voices and those connections. That would be a great idea.
Good. And for those of you that have a Facebook page, let us know what it is, and we'll be happy to like you. And please like us. Our Facebook page is the American Association of Caregiving Youth, and our Twitter is at AACY.org.
We just had one question come in, and it's a very good one, again from Emily. Any advice to coalitions about connecting with schools to be supportive and do outreach? And I think that's such an important question because you have all developed, it sounds like, incredible relationships with the schools, and I think that's a critical piece. So how can our coalitions do that? So
what we have found is that usually there's a contact with an individual, but if we have a director of education services who used to be a teacher and a principal and works with the school district, and our school district is large. It's the 11th largest in the country. And so she is our director of education services. So like I speak a healthcare language, she speaks what I call education ease, and can help to facilitate any conversations. Also, I believe that some of our school board members and principals would be certainly willing to provide testimonials and, you know, really see the results. They have seen the results of the support of their children. So we're really working synergistically with them, because their goal is to do good and to keep kids educated, to keep them in school. And this is like a hidden population. You don't go to school. In middle school is the time you don't want to be different. You don't go to school and say, hey, guess what I did this morning? And, you know, they first probably need to be educated about the issues surrounding caregiving youth.
Exactly. Any other questions? We did have one comment come in, someone who's very grateful for the webinar. She says, very impressive spots and videos and very timely for me, as I just got an application from a 20-year-old taking care of her grandmother full-time, he's been taking care of his grandmother full-time since he was 15.
Well, he's lucky he's 20.
Yeah. Now he can maybe at least have access to some services that he didn't have before.
If you're just because you turn 18 doesn't mean that's the day that you start caregiving.
Exactly. Any other questions or comments? Again, if any of you think of questions or comments after we disconnect from the webinar today, I think that ARCH certainly pledges to continue our working with Connie and AACY for whatever we can do to help move this issue forward and make sure that Lifespan Respite is responding to the needs of all caregivers, including youth caregivers. So if you have questions or comments, oh, here's one just came in. Someone's talking about what a good idea it might be to match AmeriCorps Vista volunteers with these youth. Have you explored that?
Well, actually, not Vista volunteers, but we have AmeriCorps members that have worked with our organization, and they're primarily through the Literacy Coalition here and have helped with, like, counseling at camp and other activities with the kids. So AmeriCorps is important, and AmeriCorps Vista is a great idea to explore. I love it.
Increasingly, a lot of our coalitions and lifespan programs are looking to volunteer and faith-based communities to help expand respite options, since there will never be enough money in the formal service system to provide respite for anybody, let alone a youth caregiver. So have you worked with the faith community in your area or anywhere else nationally around this particular issue?
Well, we have, because don't forget, that's the origin of our work.
Right, that's right. Robert Wood Johnson, yes.
Yeah, and so we do have cooperation from local congregations, and even not so much in terms of respite, but some of them have band together to do some home improvements and other, and transportation, which is a big thing because if mom's home in bed, children don't get to activities. So each time that we hold an activity, we have to figure out a way for transportation to and from.
Right, and we would actually see those activities that you're providing for these kids as respite from their caregiving.
Well, they are.
Exactly. So any activities that can be organized. Do you have to then provide someone to come into the home and watch the family member while the
Well,
youth
that's
is
a great
off?
question, Jill, and sometimes we have and we do, but you know, a lot of times at some core level, the families realize that the children do need a break, and so sometimes a family member, you know, from another part of the local area may come and stay so that people can experience the overnight camp.
Right, right. So that you help them explore what other supports they have within their own families and communities that can come in and give them a break. Yeah.
Because often families don't like somebody from the outside coming in, and so if they can do something internally, it often works better for them. And I know that this population works too with children with special needs and those on the autism spectrum with families needing respite for that. And it's so interesting because we had, well, at one of our camps, the brother of a disabled child was there, and he was so used to isolating himself as a way of coping that when he got around people who cared about him, he felt really challenged. And so he stayed through our campfire at night, and then a volunteer drove him home. So, you know, it's often just so much of an unawareness by everyone about the impact on these children, and they also have an understanding of what their family is going through, and they don't want to put any more burden on their family members, so often don't let them know what's going on with them. They want to protect them.
Right. I actually, while we still have a few minutes, I would like to ask our participants, if you are a respite provider yourself or working for an agency that provides respite, have you personally seen this issue come forward into your agency, and do you know of any services in your own communities that are available for this population? And you can just type in a quick answer if there's anyone there who wants to share something interesting that you might be doing in your own communities for this population. No one's readily typing. That's probably why they're on the webinar today, so they can learn and get some more information and take all this wonderful information and put it to good use in the agencies and services and coalitions that you're working with.
Yeah, but it's a process, and it's an education and awareness process, but we do have a lot of resources on our website that, you know, people can access.
Yes, I do urge all of you to take a look at their website. It is full of really wonderful information. If you haven't seen it yet, I would take some time to look through the website and glean.
I would also mention that the content capsule, which is on the home page, can be embedded in anyone's page. And so it has an infographic that looks at the results of the national study, as well as an ABC video and the CNN video, as well as some comments from the children. There's also a podcast that was created by our education network and with a voiceover by national sportscaster Dick Stockton. And so if anybody out there is a sports fan or football fan, you'll recognize his name and maybe more importantly his voice. And so he dubbed himself the voice of caregiving youth. So there's the lower right-hand corner, there's a way to embed that whole content capsule on your website, and you're welcome to do that.
Well, I think we might do that on the ARCH website. Now that we have this archived webinar, we'll be able to link to all the wonderful resources that you sent us also. We just had one more question come in from Susan in South Carolina. I love your assurance, we're here. Can we borrow it? Frankly, it's excellent for any family caregiver.
Absolutely. You know, that's the greatest compliment is copying something, so sure.
That was a very powerful PSA. That was probably the most powerful, less than 30-second PSA I think I've ever seen. It was really excellent.
Thank you.
Well, again, I want to
because it's the kids, you know.
Yeah.
It's not us, it's the kids.
Yeah. Sometimes our caregivers speak very powerfully for themselves and make the case.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you both so much for such an excellent, eye-opening and educational webinar. And everyone who's out there, we will be sending, as I said, as soon as the recording becomes available to us, we will post it on the ARCH website and send you a link to it, as well as to all the great resources that Connie sent that you can download from the link you received earlier today. But we will also send them around to you. And please don't forget to check your inbox after you hang up today, and please give us your feedback on the very quick and short evaluation form online. That would be extremely helpful. So again, without further ado, I want to thank our presenters again, and stay tuned for more information from us and our continued partnerships in this area. We're now linked together, and we will continue to share information. So thank you all very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you again, Connie and Cara.